I am Remy. I'm a 28-year-old civil servant. I work at the Labor Standards Supervision Office. Every day, I receive various consultations and visit different companies for investigations, leading to busy days. It's a physically and mentally demanding job, but I find fulfillment in it. However, about a year ago, during an investigation at a certain company, I got involved in an unbelievable incident. This event was triggered by a consultation from a female temp worker at that company. What I'm about to share is a real-life nightmare that happened to me. The person who came for consultation was a female temp worker in her early 30s. She seemed deeply troubled. Her complexion was pale, and she appeared extremely fatigued. Tearfully, she explained that she was being mistreated at her temp assignment company. Upon further discussion, it became clear that the 50-something manager, who was her workplace superior, had a tyrannical personality. He engaged in insidious harassment against employees he disliked, particularly targeting non-regular workers like temps and part-timers. His verbal abuse was routine, and he treated these employees as if they weren't even human. He'd say things like, "Temps are like livestock," or "they're just brainless bottom feeders," and would assign tasks beyond their contract obligations, even forcing overtime. Oddly enough, despite being the one who exploited others, the manager himself was often absent. He'd casually announce in the morning that he was going out for field work and then disappear until evening, leaving everyone waiting. Witnesses reported seeing him napping in his car or engaging in leisure activities during work hours. When he finally returned to the office, he'd instructed subordinates to work overtime while he left promptly at regular hours. What's more, despite holding the position of manager, he was remarkably incompetent. He frequently made mistakes, yet never acknowledged them. Instead, he blamed his subordinates for his errors, maintaining a nonchalant demeanor. Many employees had left the company due to their inability to tolerate this abusive boss. New graduates barely lasted a year, and temp workers quit almost immediately. The workplace perpetually suffered from understaffing. Upon hearing her story, I wondered why no one had reported such an egregious boss to the company's higher-ups before quitting. If he were merely subtly harassing people behind the scenes, that would be one thing, but his behavior was blatant workplace bullying. Despite this, he remained in his managerial position without any consequences, which baffled me. According to the female temp worker, the manager would threaten departing employees.
"If you dare report me to the CEO or the temp agency, I'll spread nasty rumors about you among all the industry peers I know."
Indeed, when faced with such threats, even innocent employees who haven't done anything wrong might become fearful. The cunning manager is capable of anything against those who oppose him. He could spread baseless rumors, ensuring they never find employment again.
That's why the manager's misdeeds remain hidden indefinitely. Everyone suffers in silence. I've reached my limit too.
The woman tearfully confided. A few days after receiving this consultation, I visited the temp workers' company. This time, it was an unannounced inspection, what we call a surprise investigation. Given the nature of the complaint, which hinted at illegal long working hours and overtime, I was curious about the manager himself. Soon, I would personally witness just how wicked he truly was. Upon arriving at the company, I was surprised. Expecting a gloomy workplace due to the terrible boss, I found the opposite. The building was new, the office had a bright atmosphere, and there was even a spacious employee cafeteria. After admiring the workplace, I headed to the reception desk to introduce myself as a labor standards inspector. The receptionist promptly called the HR department, but unfortunately, the responsible person was busy with other visitors. So, I waited near the cafeteria menu, hoping the HR representative would arrive soon. After a few minutes, a middle-aged man approached me. Initially, I thought he might be from HR, but he seemed more interested in entering the cafeteria. I stepped aside to avoid blocking his way, but then he unexpectedly stopped right in front of me. His gaze scrutinized my face, and he asked,
Who are you? Haven't seen your face before. Are you a new temp worker?
I reached for my business card to introduce myself, but before I could, he blurted out,
It's quite audacious for a temp like you to use the employee cafeteria.
It dawned on me. I was still in my 20s, and my appearance could easily be mistaken for that of a temp worker. But then, I realized something crucial. The fact that he openly looked down on temp workers likely meant that this man was indeed the problematic manager. Curious, I glanced at the ID badge hanging from his neck, and as expected, it confirmed my suspicions. He was the very same manager the woman had complained about. Although I had hoped to meet him at some point, I never expected to encounter the manager face to face just before the investigation. It caught me off guard. However, since this was a rare opportunity, I decided to ask the manager directly, Does this company have a rule prohibiting temp workers from using the employee cafeteria? The manager's mood seemed to sour, and he retorted,
What? What nonsense is this?
His sharp gaze bore into me as he continued,
There's no such rule. Those lowly temps have no right to dirty our employee cafeteria.
Then, unexpectedly, he snatched a bowl of soup from an employee who was dining near the cafeteria entrance and hurled it at me. I was so startled that I couldn't react, just stood there dumbfounded. Thankfully, other employees and cafeteria staff rushed over, offering towels to clean up the mess. By then, my suit was soaked from head to sleeve with soup. I couldn't believe he'd thrown soup at me out of nowhere. Trembling with shock and anger, I wiped my wet face and clothes with the towel. The manager smirked and said,
This is what happens when a temp worker gets too cheeky.
His words ignited my fury. Regardless of the misunderstanding, mistreating temp workers who shared the same workplace was unacceptable. I thought to myself, enough is enough. I won't hold back anymore. As I waited for the HR representative, oblivious to my true identity, the manager continued his condescending remarks.
Why would temps need break time anyway? They're like livestock. Working all day is good enough for them.
That's when I confronted him. Did you know that labor laws apply to temp workers too? The manager scoffed.
Ha! Who cares about those petty laws?
He leaned in, still unaware of my role, and challenged me.
You wouldn't dare report me to labor standards, would you? Even as a temp?
With a calm voice, I replied, You're mistaken. I'm here to enforce those very laws. What do you mean, report? I'm an inspector from the Labor Standards Supervision Office, I said. The manager blinked in surprise. But then he regained his smirk and retorted,
Oh, come on! A mere temp worker spinning tall tales? Ridiculous.
I held my ground. No, I'm not a temp. I'm a labor standards inspector. I thrust my business card in front of his face. The manager's expression turned ashen. Just then, the HR representative rushed over.
Sorry for the delay.
The manager stammered, seemingly at a loss for words. I left with a simple statement. I'll be reporting everything that happened. Guided by the HR staff, I finally entered the conference room and began my investigation. Reviewing time cards and payroll records, interviewing employees, I uncovered the truth. This company indeed forced illegal overtime on its workers, and the culprit was none other than the infamous manager. He'd accuse employees,
Missing deadlines is your incompetence.
and he'd make them work beyond regular hours. Some brave souls asked,
Do we get overtime pay?
but the manager dismissed them.
This isn't overtime. It's your incompetence.
Then he'd leave promptly, avoiding any paper trail. Apparently, he sometimes made them work until late into the night. No overtime pay, just unpaid service hours. And the temp workers suffered, denied proper breaks, burdened with extra tasks beyond their job descriptions. Even the employee cafeteria, meant for everyone, became off limits due to the manager's harassment. So, they ate at their desks, interrupted by the manager's relentless demands. Of course, the temps grumbled about the manager's behavior, but he'd threaten.
Cross me, and I'll terminate your contract.
Most quit voluntarily, unable to bear it. And the most absurd part? The company's top executive, the president, was blissfully unaware. The news that someone from the Labor Standards Supervision Office was coming must have caused quite a stir. The president joined the meeting midway, allowing me to hear the conversation directly. The president had entrusted the fieldwork to the manager, believing in his competence. Perhaps the manager excelled at ingratiating himself with superiors. Shockingly, the manager had even discussed a promotion. Although that's certainly off the table now due to recent events, he had exploited the president's trust to mistreat employees for a long time. How many people had suffered due to the manager's actions? It's hard to fathom. But today marks the end of his unchecked behavior. I made it clear that we must thoroughly rectify the illegal practices. After concluding the day's investigation, I informed the coordinator that I'd be in touch later. Over the years, I've encountered various companies, but few bosses have been as despicable as this manager. With a sigh, I headed toward the company entrance. However, just as I approached the automatic doors, something unexpected happened. The manager, drenched in sweat, chased after me. I had no desire to see his face again, but he blocked my way, insisting.
My sincere apologies for earlier.
I stepped back, and other employees glanced our way. The manager continued, unfazed.
I had no idea you were from the Labor Standards Supervision Office. I deeply regret my rude behavior.
His trembling voice and sudden change in demeanor left me dumbfounded. Only moments ago, he'd looked down on me as a temp worker. Now, he groveled, trying to appease me. Perhaps he finally recognized his incompetence and maintained his self-esteem by belittling those in weaker positions. I responded coldly. It's too late for apologies now. Expect strict guidance soon. Please cooperate accordingly. The manager stammered.
But
Undeterred, I added, and incidentally, I'll be filing a formal complaint. His eyes widened.
a complaint?
I explained. Your actions qualify as assault under the law. You intentionally scalded me with soup. Whether I'm a temp or a labor standards inspector, such behavior is unacceptable. The mention of the assault left the manager trembling. He pleaded.
Please, spare me from involving the police.
Despite his pale face and repeated apologizing, I remained unyielding. You've tormented countless people by abusing your position. Reflect on your actions and make amends. With that, I left him behind, heading out of the company. Upon returning for further investigation, I learned that the manager had already resigned. Apparently, His numerous transgressions, forcing overtime, among others, had led to demotion, but not dismissal. Desperate to cling to the company, he'd realized he had nowhere else to go. However, my complaint led to his arrest. Although he received probation, he couldn't stay at the company any longer. Reluctantly, he submitted his resignation. Attempting to find new employment, he faced rejection due to his age and criminal record. Now, he works as a temp laborer in a factory, barely scraping by. The irony isn't lost on me. The manager, who once looked down on temps, likely faces a younger boss's wrath now. Meanwhile, the company has improved working conditions, paid overdue overtime, and fostered a vibrant atmosphere for both regular and temp employees. Despite the unexpected trouble, knowing that more people are smiling at work brings me relief. I'll continue giving my best in this job. How did you like this story? If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to our channel. Until next time.